What if I told you that humanity's greatest weapon against alien invasion isn't our technology, our numbers, or even our nuclear arsenal? What if our secret weapon is something so fundamentally human that no alien species could ever replicate it? Something that turns our greatest weakness into our most devastating strength. Welcome back to the channel, Space Explorers. Today we're diving deep into an epic HFY story that reveals the one thing about humanity that makes even the most advanced alien civilizations tremble. But before we begin this journey, make sure to hit that like button if you're ready for some serious human badassery. And don't forget to subscribe with notifications on. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. This is a story about deception, sacrifice, and the kind of tactical brilliance that can only come from a species that evolved on a death world. So settle in, because we're about to discover why aliens call us the impossible species. The message arrived on a Tuesday. Not that Tuesdays meant anything to the Zephyrian Collective, but for Dr. Sarah Chen, head of Earth's Xenological Defense Initiative, it was just another mundane day until the quantum communicators started screaming. Director Chen to the Command Center Priority Alpha. The announcement echoed through the underground facility, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Colorado Rockies. Sarah dropped her coffee, real coffee, not the synthetic stuff, and ran. The command center buzzed with controlled chaos. Dozens of technicians hunched over holographic displays while Admiral Rivera, Earth's top military strategist, stood rigid at the central console. "Talk to me, Marcus," Sarah said, still catching her breath. "First contact," he replied grimly. "And they're not here to shake hands." The main display showed a fleet of ships that defied human understanding of physics, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them, each one the size of Manhattan, hanging in perfect formation just beyond Pluto's orbit. "How many?" Sarah asked. 12,000 ships, each one carrying an estimated 50,000 troops. Rivera's jaw tightened. "Sarah, they're not just here to conquer us. According to their transmission, they're here to study us." The transmission played across the speakers, translated by humanity's most advanced AI systems. "Greetings, primitive species of the third planet. We are the Zephyrian Collective, shepherds of galactic civilization. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. Resistance is futile and will only result in unnecessary suffering. We have studied your species for 3 of your solar cycles. You are classified as Deathworlders, a curious anomaly that requires examination. Prepare for peaceful transition to collective oversight." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "They've been watching us for 3 years. That's worse." Rivera pulled up another display. "Our deep space monitoring stations have been detecting similar fleets approaching 17 other systems, all inhabited by species they classify as Deathworlders. Sarah, they're not just invading Earth. They're conducting a galaxy-wide harvest." In the corner of the command center, Dr. James Park, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology, was frantically analyzing the transmission data. What he found made his hands shake. "Director," he called out, his voice barely steady. "There's something else, hidden in their transmission, a secondary signal. It's not meant for us." Sarah and Rivera rushed over. "What kind of signal?" "Coordinates. Dozens of them. And Sarah?" Park's face went pale. "One of them is pointing to a location inside our own solar system. They have assets here already." The emergency session of the United Earth Council lasted 18 hours. Representatives from every nation, every military branch, every scientific institution, all trying to answer the same impossible question. How do you fight an enemy with technology thousands of years ahead of your own? "Conventional warfare is suicide," General Harrison from the Joint Chiefs stated bluntly. "Their shields can deflect our most powerful nuclear weapons. Their energy weapons can glass entire continents. We're talking about a civilization that treats faster than light travel like we treat automobiles." Sarah stood at the head of the conference table, her mind racing. Then we don't fight conventionally. What are you suggesting? Asked President Martinez. I'm suggesting we remember what makes us human. Sarah activated the holographic display. For 3 years, they've been studying us. They think they understand us. But there's one thing about humanity that no alien species has ever truly grasped. She pulled up footage from throughout human history: the Battle of Thermopylae, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the Siege of Stalingrad, the evacuation of Dunkirk. We're the only species in the known galaxy that evolved on a Class 12 death world. Every single day of our evolution, our planet tried to kill us. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, climate changes that would wipe out entire civilizations. And we not only survived, we thrived. Admiral Rivera leaned forward. You're talking about guerrilla warfare. I'm talking about something deeper than that. Sarah's eyes blazed with determination. I'm talking about the one thing that separates us from every other species in the galaxy. We're the only ones who learn to lie. The room fell silent. Think about it, Sarah continued. Every other species they've conquered developed on garden worlds. They evolved cooperation, honesty, direct communication. They can't conceive of deception on a strategic level. But humans? We've been lying to each other for survival since we lived in caves. We've turned deception into an art form. Dr. Park, who had been quietly analyzing alien communication patterns, suddenly looked up. She's right. Their entire communication structure is based on direct information transfer. They literally cannot comprehend the concept of saying one thing while meaning another. So what's the plan? President Martinez asked. Sarah smiled, and it was the kind of smile that had once made saber-toothed tigers think twice about hunting early humans. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to make them think they've won. While the council debated strategy, Dr. Park was making a disturbing discovery. The alien assets in their solar system weren't just observation posts. They were infiltration units. And according to his analysis, they'd been replacing key personnel in governments and military installations worldwide. Sarah, he whispered urgently during a break, we have a bigger problem. I think they have people on the inside. Human-looking, but the biosignatures are all wrong. Sarah felt her stomach drop. How many? I don't know, but Sarah, I think one of them might be in this room. The Zephyrian invasion began exactly as their ultimatum promised, with overwhelming force designed to break human resistance in a matter of hours. Their first mistake was assuming humans would fight like every other species they'd conquered. The massive alien dreadnoughts descended through Earth's atmosphere, their energy shields shimmering like aurora as human missiles and energy weapons bounced harmlessly off their hulls. Major cities around the globe, New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, found themselves under the shadow of ships that blotted out the sun. But instead of the desperate, chaotic resistance the Zephyrians expected, they encountered something that confused their tactical computers. Organized surrender. This is General Harrison of the United Earth Defense Force, came the broadcast on all frequencies. To all human military units, stand down. Repeat, stand down. We cannot win this fight. All units are ordered to surrender immediately to preserve civilian lives. Across the globe, human military forces laid down their weapons. Governments issued statements of capitulation. The resistance that the Zephyrians had prepared for simply didn't happen. Commander Zix-9, leader of the invasion force, studied the tactical displays from his flagship with growing confusion. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever surrendered this quickly or completely. Status report, he commanded his tactical officer. All major population centers secured with minimal resistance. Human military forces have surrendered en masse. Civilian populations are complying with relocation orders. The officer paused. Commander, this is unprecedented. Zix-9's crystalline features shifted in what might have been satisfaction. Perhaps these Deathworlders are not as formidable as our intelligence suggested. Begin Phase 2, Specimen Collection and Analysis. What the Zephyrians didn't know was that every human surrender had been carefully orchestrated. Every capitulation was part of a plan 3 years in the making. In hidden bunkers around the globe, the real human military watched and waited. Dr. Park's investigation had revealed the scope of the infiltration. 17 key personnel in the Earth Defense Council had been replaced by Zephyrian agents. But he'd also discovered something else. The aliens' shape-shifting technology had a fatal flaw. It couldn't replicate human emotional responses under extreme stress. "We need to flush them out," he told Sarah through an encrypted channel. "But we need to do it without alerting the main invasion force. We make them think we're planning something we're not. Force them to reveal themselves." The Zephyrian research facility was established in what used to be Central Park, a massive crystalline structure that rose like a twisted spear into the Manhattan sky, surrounded by energy barriers that made the air itself shimmer. Inside, Dr. Elena Vasquez tried to control her breathing as alien scientists, if you could call them that, subjected her to test after test. She was one of 50 humans selected for detailed analysis, though she suspected the real number was much higher. The Zephyrians were thorough, she had to give them that. They'd mapped her DNA, scanned her brain patterns, tested her reflexes and psychological responses. What they hadn't realized was that Elena wasn't just a random civilian. She was a former Navy SEAL turned neuroscientist, and every test they ran was giving her valuable intelligence about their capabilities. Fascinating. The lead researcher, who called himself Researcher Prime, commented as he reviewed her latest brain scans. "Your neural pathways show adaptations we've never encountered. The capacity for what you call creative thinking is far beyond anything we've observed in other species." Elena forced herself to appear frightened and confused. "I don't understand. What do you want from us?" "Understanding," Researcher Prime replied. "Your species survived on a world that should have killed you 1,000 times over. We must know how. The applications for our own evolution could be significant." What Researcher Prime didn't know was that Elena's neural implant, disguised as a medical device for a childhood injury, was recording everything. Every scan, every test, every casual comment about Zephyrian technology and biology was being transmitted to hidden receivers throughout the city. The infiltrator reveal came during what appeared to be a routine strategy meeting. Dr. Park had prepared a false briefing about a secret weapon hidden in the Antarctic research stations. As he presented the fabricated intelligence, he watched the faces around the table. 17 people showed no emotional response to the news that humanity might have a fighting chance. "Interesting," Sarah said calmly. "Dr. Park, could you elaborate on the weapon's capabilities?" As Park continued his fictional briefing, Sarah quietly activated a hidden signal. Within minutes, security teams had surrounded the building. The infiltrators revealed themselves when they realized they'd been discovered, their human disguises melting away to reveal the crystalline, insectoid forms beneath. The battle was brief but vicious. The aliens were strong and fast, but they'd never encountered humans who were expecting them. "Now we know their weakness," Sarah said, as the last infiltrator was subdued. "They can copy our appearance, but they can't copy our souls." 3 months into the occupation, the Zephyrians were beginning to understand why humans were classified as Deathworlders. It wasn't their physical capabilities, though those were impressive. It wasn't their technology, which was primitive by collective standards. It was something far more dangerous: their absolute refusal to accept defeat. The resistance started small: sabotage supply lines, communications disruptions, equipment failures that seemed random but followed suspicious patterns. The Zephyrians had expected some level of insurgency, Every conquered species produced a few holdouts. But this was different. This was coordinated. Commander Zix-9 studied the reports with growing frustration. "How many resistance cells have we identified?" "None, sir," his intelligence officer replied. "That is, we've eliminated 47 separate groups, but new ones keep appearing. It's as if the entire population is involved." "That's impossible. No species can maintain that level of coordination without centralized command." What the commander didn't understand was that humans had been preparing for this exact scenario for 3 years. Every major city, every small town, every rural community had been quietly organized into independent cells. Each cell knew only what it needed to know, but all were working toward the same goal. In the tunnels beneath New York, former Marine Colonel Jake Morrison coordinated with the resistance cells across the globe. The old subway system had been converted into a vast underground network, invisible to Zephyrian sensors. "Status report from London," came the encrypted transmission. "Package delivered. Zephyrian research facility experiencing technical difficulties. Tokyo confirms," another voice added. "Their specimen collection has been interrupted." Morrison smiled grimly. The Zephyrians thought they were studying isolated human subjects. They had no idea that every specimen was a trained operative, gathering intelligence and sabotaging their operations from within. The intelligence gathered from the infiltrators had revealed something crucial. The Zephyrian Collective wasn't just conquering worlds. They were stealing the unique evolutionary advantages of each species they encountered. Humanity's capacity for deception and creative thinking was exactly what they needed to overcome a rival empire that had been stalemating them for centuries. "They're not just invading us," Dr. Park explained to the resistance leadership. "They're trying to become us, but they don't understand that what makes us human can't be copied or stolen. It has to be lived." 6 months into the occupation, Researcher Prime was beginning to question everything he thought he knew about human psychology. The specimens were uncooperative. Not in the violent, desperate way of other conquered species, but in ways that defied logical analysis. They would comply with direct orders while somehow sabotaging the intended results. They would provide information that was technically accurate but practically useless. They would appear to cooperate while actually accomplishing the opposite of what was requested. "I don't understand," he confided to his assistant. "Their brain scans show they're telling the truth, but the results of their actions suggest deliberate deception." "Perhaps," his assistant suggested, "the concept of truth is different for this species." Researcher Prime considered this. It was a disturbing thought. The collective's entire civilization was built on the principle of direct, honest communication. The idea that a species could function while routinely deceiving each other was unsettling. What he didn't know was that the humans had figured out how to beat the Zephyrian truth detection technology. It wasn't about lying. It was about believing multiple contradictory things simultaneously, a uniquely human talent that the aliens couldn't comprehend. Elena Vasquez had become a master of this technique. When asked about human military capabilities, she would genuinely believe that humanity was helpless, while simultaneously planning the next phase of resistance operations. The Zephyrian scanners read her as truthful because, in her mind, she was. "The key," she explained to her fellow specimens during a carefully orchestrated accidental meeting, "is compartmentalization. Don't think of it as lying, think of it as selective truth."
We have detected
The breakthrough came when the Resistance realized that the Zephyrians' greatest strength, their interconnected collective consciousness, was also their greatest weakness. Every Zephyrian was linked to the others through quantum entanglement, sharing thoughts and experiences instantaneously across their entire empire. If we can introduce the right kind of information into their network, Dr. Park explained, we can potentially affect their entire civilization. "What kind of information?" Sarah asked. Park smiled. "The most dangerous kind. human ideas. The plan was audacious, even by human standards. Instead of fighting the Zephyrian Collective consciousness, they would join it and then change it from within. Dr. Vasquez volunteered for the most dangerous part of the mission. Using technology reverse-engineered from captured Zephyrian equipment, she would allow herself to be connected to their collective network. But instead of being absorbed by it, she would introduce something the Zephyrians had never encountered: human creativity, human doubt, and, most dangerously of all, human individuality. The risk is enormous, Dr. Park warned as they prepared the neural interface. If this goes wrong, we could lose you entirely. Or worse, you could become one of them. Elena strapped herself into the modified Zephyrian neural chair, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. Doc, I've been preparing for this my whole life. Every human has. We're the species that looked at a planet trying to kill us and decided to make it our home. This is just another day at the office. And the connection established slowly, Elena's consciousness expanding beyond her individual mind into the vast network of the Zephyrian Collective. For a moment she was overwhelmed by the sheer scope of it. Millions of minds thinking in perfect harmony, sharing knowledge instantaneously across thousands of light years. But then her human training kicked in. Instead of trying to resist the collective, she embraced it, while maintaining her core sense of self. It was like being a single instrument in a massive orchestra, while still playing her own unique melody. The effect on the collective was immediate and profound. For the first time in their species' history, Zephyrians began to experience doubt, not the logical analysis of multiple possibilities that they were familiar with, but genuine uncertainty about their actions and beliefs. Individual Zephyrians across the galaxy began to question orders, to wonder if there might be better ways to accomplish their goals, to imagine alternatives that had never occurred to them before. Commander Zix-9 felt it first as a strange sensation in his neural pathways, a questioning of his mission that seemed to come from nowhere. "Status report," he commanded, but for the first time, he found himself wondering if he really needed a status report, or if he was just following routine. The thought was so alien to his nature that it stopped him cold. Dr. Park, monitoring Elena's vital signs from the hidden command center, watched in amazement as the Zephyrian communication networks began to show unprecedented patterns. "Sarah, you need to see this. Their entire command structure is fragmenting." Is Elena safe? More than safe, she's winning. Across the Zephyrian Empire, the infection of human consciousness spread like wildfire through their quantum-entangled network. What had been a perfectly coordinated civilization began to experience something they had no word for: internal conflict. On the research station orbiting Kepler 442b, researcher Prime found himself staring at a specimen from the local species, a peaceful, herbivorous race that had surrendered immediately upon first contact. For 3,000 years, this would have been routine. Catalog the species, extract useful genetic material, integrate the survivors into the collective's workforce. But now, for the first time, he found himself wondering, what if we're wrong? The thought was so heretical, so fundamentally opposed to everything the collective stood for, that it should have been immediately suppressed by his neural conditioning. Instead, it grew stronger. What if there are better ways to interact with other species? What if conquest isn't the only option? Similar thoughts were occurring to Zephyrians throughout the galaxy. Fleet commanders began to question their orders. Scientists started to wonder if their research methods were ethical. Even the High Council on the collective homeworld found themselves debating concepts that had never existed in their language before. Back on Earth, Elena maintained her connection to the network, while her human consciousness acted like a virus, spreading doubt, creativity, and individuality throughout the collective. But she wasn't trying to destroy them. She was trying to save them. The beautiful thing about human nature, she transmitted to her fellow resistance members, is that we don't just survive, we help others survive too. even our enemies. The Zephyrian response was predictable. They tried to sever the connection, to isolate the infected nodes of their network. But it was too late. The ideas had already spread too far, taken root in too many minds. For the first time in their species' history, individual Zephyrians began to act independently. Commander Zix-9 stood in his command center, staring at reports that made no sense. Half his fleet was refusing orders. The other half was requesting clarification on missions they'd never questioned before. And strangest of all, several ships had actually begun communicating with the human resistance, asking questions about concepts like mercy and coexistence. His most intelligent mercy operator, an attorney named Yu Kupike, offered a "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human leadership. They're requesting a meeting." A meeting? Zix-9 found himself curious about what they might have to say. The old him would have dismissed such a request immediately, put them through. Sarah Chen's image appeared on the main display, and Zix-9 was struck by something he'd never noticed before. The complexity of human facial expressions, the way emotions played across their features in patterns that conveyed meaning beyond words. "Commander," Sarah said, "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about what's really happening here." The meeting took place in neutral space, aboard a hastily constructed station that represented the first truly cooperative effort between humans and Zephyrians. Commander Zix-9, accompanied by a small delegation of his most trusted officers, faced Sarah Chen and the human leadership team. Aye, but this wasn't the same commander who had arrived at Earth 9 months earlier. The infection of human consciousness had changed him, given him something his species had never possessed: the ability to see situations from multiple perspectives simultaneously. "You've done something to us," he said without preamble. "Our entire civilization is changing." "We've given you a gift," Sarah replied. "The same gift our death world gave us. The ability to think for yourselves." "It's chaos," one of Zix-9's officers protested. "Our perfect unity is fragmenting. Individual Zephyrians are making decisions without consulting the collective. Some are even refusing direct orders." Dr. Park leaned forward. "What you call chaos, we call growth. What you call fragmentation, we call individuality. Your species has been stagnant for millennia because you never learned to disagree with yourselves." Zix-9 considered this. The concept of productive disagreement was still foreign to him, but he was beginning to understand its value. The humans in our research facilities, they were never really specimens, were they? Every single one was a volunteer, Elena Vasquez said, speaking for the first time. She was still connected to the Zephyrian network, but now she served as a bridge between the two species rather than an infiltrator. "We knew you would study us. We wanted you to, because we knew that understanding humanity would change you." "But why?" Zix-9 asked. "We invaded your world. We enslaved your people. Why would you want to help us?" Sarah smiled, and it was the same smile that had once convinced saber-toothed tigers to become humanity's companions instead of their predators. "Because that's what Deathworlders do. We don't just survive, we help others survive too. Even when they start as our enemies." "There's something else you need to understand," Dr. Park continued. "You've been classifying species as Deathworlders based on the hostility of their home planets, but you've missed the real significance. It's not about surviving hostile environments. It's about what that survival teaches you." He activated a holographic display showing dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy. "Every species you've conquered came from garden worlds, perfect climates, abundant resources, no natural predators. They never had to learn to adapt, to innovate, to cooperate with former enemies for mutual survival. But Deathworlders," Sarah added, "we learned something else entirely. We learned that the universe doesn't care about your plans, your hierarchies, or your perfect systems. The universe will throw everything it has at you, and the only way to survive is to be flexible, creative, and willing to work with anyone, even your enemies. If it means everyone lives to see another day, Zix-9 felt something he'd never experienced before. Humility. You're saying we've been approaching galactic civilization entirely wrong. Not wrong, Elena corrected gently. Incomplete. You've mastered order, efficiency, unity, but you never learned chaos, creativity, or individuality. You need both to truly thrive. The transformation of the Zephyrian Collective didn't happen overnight. Across their empire, individual Zephyrians struggled with concepts that had no precedent in their culture. Some embraced the change, finding liberation in the ability to think independently. Others resisted, clinging to the old ways of perfect unity and unquestioning obedience. But the change was irreversible. The human virus of consciousness had spread too far, taken root too deeply. The collective was becoming something new, not a hive mind, but a true collective of individuals working together by choice rather than compulsion. On Earth, the occupation had transformed into something unprecedented, a collaborative research project. Zephyrian technology combined with human creativity was producing innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Faster-than-light communication that didn't require quantum entanglement, energy sources that worked in harmony with planetary ecosystems, medical techniques that could heal both organic and crystalline life forms. The irony, Sarah observed during one of the daily joint briefings, is that you came here to steal our evolutionary advantages. Instead, you're learning to develop your own. Commander Zix-9, who now insisted on being called simply Zix, nodded thoughtfully. We spent so long trying to perfect ourselves that we forgot how to grow. Your species taught us that perfection isn't a destination. It's a process. The changes weren't limited to the Zephyrian Collective. Throughout the galaxy, other species were taking notice. The empire that had seemed invincible was suddenly different, more flexible, more willing to negotiate, more interested in cooperation than conquest. Dr. Vasquez, still serving as a bridge between human and Zephyrian consciousness, reported on the broader implications. It's spreading beyond the collective. Other species are seeing what's possible when you combine order with chaos, unity with individuality. We're looking at a fundamental shift in galactic civilization. And it all started, Dr. Park mused, because humans learned to lie. Not just lie, Sarah corrected. We learned to hold contradictory truths simultaneously, to believe in hope while preparing for despair, to trust while remaining vigilant, to cooperate with our enemies while never forgetting they might become enemies again. Zix considered this. Your secret weapon wasn't deception, it was complexity. Exactly. Every other species in the galaxy thinks in binary terms. Friend or enemy, truth or lie, order or chaos. Humans learn to think in spectrums, to find the spaces between absolutes. That's what made us impossible to predict or control. The real test of the new paradigm came when the collective's ancient enemies, the hegemony of worlds, launched their long-planned invasion of Zephyrian space. For centuries, the two empires had been locked in a cold war, each waiting for the other to show weakness. The hegemony had been watching the changes in the collective with growing alarm. The rigid, predictable enemy they'd been preparing to fight had become something chaotic and unpredictable. Their carefully laid plans, based on millennia of studying Zephyrian behavior patterns, were suddenly useless. This is our chance, Hegemony War Leader Krath declared to his assembled fleet commanders. The collective is fragmenting, their unity broken. We strike now while they're weak and divided. What Kraft didn't understand was that the collective wasn't fragmenting, it was evolving. And they weren't alone. The first hegemony battle group to enter collective space encountered something they'd never seen before. Zephyrian and human ships fighting side by side, their tactics a seamless blend of collective efficiency and human unpredictability. "Impossible," Krath muttered as he watched the tactical displays. "The humans should be slaves, not allies." His tactical officer, a member of the insectoid Vex species, clicked his mandibles nervously. "War leader, their coordination patterns make no sense. They're operating as individuals while maintaining perfect unit cohesion. Our predictive algorithms can't track their movements." The battle was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The hegemony forces, trained to fight the old collective, found themselves facing an enemy that combined the best of both order and chaos. Zephyrian ships would execute perfect formations, while human vessels improvised brilliant tactical solutions on the fly. The two approaches complemented each other in ways that multiplied their effectiveness exponentially. Admiral Rivera, commanding the human contingent from the bridge of the newly constructed Earth-Zephyrian hybrid vessel Synthesis, watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. "Status report," he called out. "Hegemony forces are retreating from sectors 7 through 12, reported his Zephyrian tactical officer, a young individual who had chosen the name Nova to reflect their newfound independence. Their command structure appears to be confused. They're not used to fighting an enemy that can think like them and unlike them at the same time," Rivera observed. "Zix, what's your assessment?" Zix, coordinating the collective forces from his own hybrid command ship, responded through the quantum communication link. "The hegemony is adapting faster than expected. They're beginning to incorporate random elements into their tactics to counter our unpredictability." "Then it's time for Phase 2, Rivera said with a smile that would have made his ancestors proud. "Let's show them what happens when Deathworlders stop playing defense." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The combined human Zephyrian fleet didn't just defeat the hegemony invasion. They did something that violated every principle of interstellar warfare. They surrendered. Not a real surrender, of course, but a tactical deception so audacious that it caught the hegemony completely off guard. Entire battle groups of human and Zephyrian ships powered down their weapons, transmitted surrender codes, and allowed themselves to be captured. War leader Krath couldn't believe his good fortune. "They're giving up, just like that?" "It appears so, War leader," his tactical officer replied, though his mandibles were clicking with uncertainty. "Our forces are taking control of their vessels now." What Krath didn't know was that every captured ship was actually a Trojan horse. The human crews had spent months learning hegemony technology from captured vessels, while the Zetherians had used their collective consciousness to coordinate a deception of unprecedented scale. The moment the hegemony forces brought the captured ships into their main fleet formations, the trap was sprung. "Now," Admiral Rivera whispered into his communicator. Across the hegemony fleet, the captured vessels suddenly came alive. But instead of attacking, they began broadcasting something the hegemony had never encountered: human music, human art, human stories, and most dangerously of all, human ideas about freedom, individuality, and the right to choose one's own destiny. The effect on the hegemony forces was immediate and devastating. Species that had been enslaved for millennia suddenly began to question their servitude. Soldiers who had never thought to disobey orders began to wonder why they were fighting. Even the hegemony leadership found themselves experiencing doubt for the first time in their lives. Dr. Vasquez, still connected to both human and Zephyrian consciousness networks, had developed a new technique: the transmission of pure concept through quantum entanglement. Not just information, but the actual experience of human emotions and ideas. "What we're doing," she explained to the Joint Command Staff, "is giving them the same gift we gave the Zephyrians: the ability to think for themselves." The results were spectacular. Across the hegemony fleet, individual soldiers began laying down their weapons. Ship commanders started questioning their orders. Entire battle groups defected to join the human Zephyrian alliance. War leader Kraft watched his empire crumble in real time, not through military defeat but through something far more powerful, the spread of hope. "What have you done to us?" he demanded in a desperate transmission to the Allied fleet. Sarah Chen's response was broadcast across all frequencies, reaching every ship in both fleets. "We've given your people the same thing we gave ourselves when we looked up at the stars from our death world. The knowledge that there's always another choice." War leader Kraft felt something he'd never experienced in his 1,000-year lifespan, the weight of moral uncertainty. Around him, his own command crew was beginning to question orders they'd followed without thought for centuries. "This is impossible," he muttered. "Order cannot exist without hierarchy. Unity cannot exist without control." "That's where you're wrong," came a new voice. Zakish speaking directly through the quantum link. "We learned something from the humans that changed everything. True unity isn't about forcing everyone to think the same way. It's about choosing to work together despite thinking differently." The battle that had begun as a military engagement had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. A philosophical revolution spreading at the speed of thought across multiple star systems. On the bridge of his flagship, war leader Kraft faced a choice that no hegemony leader had ever confronted. His fleet was fragmenting, his soldiers were defecting, and his entire worldview was crumbling. He could order a final desperate attack that would result in massive casualties on all sides, or... "War leader," his tactical officer said quietly, "I've been analyzing the human cultural transmissions. There's a concept they call mercy. I think I understand it now." Kraft looked at his officer. Really looked at him. For the first time in decades. The insectoid Vex had served loyally for 50 years, never questioning, never hesitating. Now, his compound eyes held something new. "Hope. What are you suggesting?" Kraft asked. "I'm suggesting we try something that's never been attempted in galactic history. I'm suggesting we ask for help." The transmission that went out from war leader Kraft's flagship changed the course of galactic civilization forever. "This is war leader Kraft of the Hegemony of Worlds, speaking to the human Zephyrian Alliance. We request parley. Not surrender, not negotiation for terms of defeat, but guidance. We wish to learn what you have learned." The response came not from Admiral Rivera or Commander Zix, but from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Vasquez, still serving as the bridge between species and consciousness. War leader Kraft, her voice carried across the quantum networks, reaching not just his ship but every vessel in both fleets. "The first lesson of being human is this: it's never too late to choose a better path." What followed was the most complex diplomatic, psychological, and philosophical undertaking in recorded history. The hegemony, like the collective before them, had to learn to think as individuals while maintaining their social bonds. But unlike the Zephyrians, they had to overcome millennia of oppression and rigid hierarchy. The process wasn't smooth. Some hegemony species embraced the change immediately, throwing off the chains of servitude with explosive joy. Others resisted, fearing the chaos that might come with freedom. A few even attempted to maintain the old ways through force. But the human virus of consciousness was patient and persistent. Every act of kindness, every moment of cooperation, every small choice to help rather than harm, spread the infection of hope a little further. Dr. Park, now coordinating what had become known as the Consciousness Liberation Project, reported to the Joint Leadership Council 6 months after the hegemony encounter. "The effect is spreading beyond our direct contact. We're receiving reports from across the galaxy of species spontaneously developing individual consciousness, questioning their governments, demanding representation in galactic affairs. It's like we've triggered a galaxy-wide renaissance. Chen studied the reports with a mixture of pride and concern. Are we sure this is a good thing? We're essentially destabilizing every major power structure in the galaxy. That's exactly why it's a good thing, Admiral Rivera replied. Stable tyranny isn't peace. It's just delayed conflict. What we're creating is the possibility of genuine cooperation between equals. Zips, who had become something of a philosopher warrior in the months since his transformation, added his perspective. The humans have taught us that chaos isn't the opposite of order, it's the source of growth. Without the ability to change, to adapt, to become something new, any civilization eventually stagnates and dies. But the most profound changes were happening at the individual level. Across the galaxy, beings who had never questioned their place in the universe were suddenly discovering they had choices. The rigid caste systems that had defined galactic civilization for millennia began to crumble, as individuals realized they could be more than their birth circumstances had dictated. Elena Vasquez, now permanently integrated into the Galactic Consciousness Network, served as a guide for species learning to navigate their newfound freedom. Her reports painted a picture of transformation that was both beautiful and chaotic. A hegemony warrior caste, Vex, has become a poet, writing verses about the beauty of choice. A collective research drone has started a school for young Zephyrians, teaching them to question everything. A slave species from the Outer Rim has established their own government and is negotiating as equals with their former masters. And the resistance? Sarah asked. Diminishing daily. It's hard to argue for oppression when you can literally feel the joy of freedom through the quantum network. The old ways aren't being defeated, they're being outgrown. 2 years after first contact, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The rigid empires that had dominated interstellar politics for millennia had evolved into something unprecedented. A true galactic democracy, where every species, every world, every individual had a voice. The transformation hadn't been without its challenges. Some regions had descended into temporary chaos as old power structures collapsed. There had been conflicts, misunderstandings, and growing pains as species learned to interact as equals rather than as conquerors and conquered. But the human approach to problem solving, creative, adaptive, and always looking for the third option, had provided a framework for resolving these conflicts. The concept of win-win solutions, so natural to humans but revolutionary to most galactic species, became the foundation of the new order. The Galactic Cooperative, as it came to be known, operated on principles that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. No species could be forced to join or remain in the cooperative. All decisions affecting multiple species required consensus, not majority rule. Individual rights were considered as important as collective needs. Conflict resolution focused on understanding and accommodation rather than dominance. At the first Galactic Cooperative Assembly, held in a massive space station constructed jointly by dozens of species, Chen addressed the gathered representatives. When we first encountered the Zephyrian Collective, they saw us as primitive Deathworlders, dangerous but ultimately inferior. What they didn't understand is that our primitiveness was actually our greatest strength. We never learned to accept that things had to be the way they were. We never stopped believing that tomorrow could be better than today. She gestured to the assembly hall, where beings from hundreds of worlds sat together in harmony, despite their vast differences. This is what happens when you combine the wisdom of ancient civilizations with the stubborn optimism of a species that refused to let their planet kill them. This is what happens when you realize that diversity isn't a weakness to be overcome. It's a strength to be celebrated. War leader Krath, now calling himself simply Krath and serving as an advocate for former slave species, stood to respond. The humans taught us that strength isn't about the ability to force others to obey. True strength is the ability to inspire others to choose cooperation freely. Dr. Park, now recognized as the galaxy's leading expert on consciousness integration, delivered the keynote address that finally explained humanity's secret weapon. For years, everyone assumed that humanity's advantage came from our technology, our military tactics, or our physical capabilities. But the real secret weapon was something much simpler and much more powerful. We never learned to give up hope. He activated a holographic display showing the spread of consciousness liberation across the galaxy. Every other species in the galaxy had learned to accept their limitations. Garden world species accepted that conflict was inevitable. Hive minds accepted that individuality was impossible. Hierarchical societies accepted that equality was a fantasy. But humans evolved on a world that should have killed us 1,000 times over. We learned that impossible just means no one has figured out how yet. We learned that every problem has a solution if you're creative enough to find it. And most importantly, we learned that the best solutions are the ones where everyone wins. The assembly erupted in what could only be described as galactic applause, a cacophony of sounds, colors, and energy patterns as hundreds of species expressed their approval in their own unique ways. 5 years after first contact, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the research station orbiting Earth, watching as ships from across the galaxy came and went in peaceful commerce and cultural exchange. The planet that had once been threatened with conquest was now the unofficial capital of galactic civilization. Not through force, but through the simple fact that everyone wanted to learn from the species that had changed everything. "Any regrets?" asked Zix, who had become one of her closest friends and collaborators. Elena smiled, her consciousness still connected to the galactic network, but her individuality intact. "About which part? Volunteering to be a test subject? Infecting an entire galactic empire with human consciousness? Or accidentally starting a galactic revolution?" Elevate. Elena considered the question seriously. Through the quantum network, she could feel the joy of billions of beings who had discovered freedom for the first time. She could sense the excitement of species learning to cooperate instead of compete. She could experience the wonder of civilizations discovering that the universe was far more beautiful when everyone was free to contribute their unique perspective. "No regrets," she said finally. "This is what we were meant to do. Not conquer, not dominate, but inspire. We showed the galaxy that there's always another way, always another choice, always hope for something better." The work wasn't finished. There were still regions of the galaxy where the old ways persisted, where species clung to hierarchy and oppression out of fear or tradition. But the virus of consciousness continued to spread, carried not by force, but by example. Human ships, now crewed by mixed species teams, served as ambassadors of the new way. They didn't impose human values on other cultures. Instead, they demonstrated the power of cooperation, creativity, and hope. They showed that strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to build. Dr. Park, now elderly but still sharp, continued his research into consciousness integration. His latest project involved developing ways to help species maintain their unique cultural identities while participating in the galactic community. "Unity doesn't mean uniformity," he often said. "The goal isn't to make everyone human, it's to help everyone become the best version of themselves." Admiral Rivera, promoted to head of Galactic Defense Coordination, oversaw a military force unlike any in history. Instead of conquest, their mission was protection. Instead of enforcing order, they preserved the freedom that made growth possible. "We're not soldiers anymore," he told his mixed species crews. "We're gardeners, helping civilizations grow." But perhaps the greatest victory was the simplest one. In schools across the galaxy, children of dozens of species learned together, played together, and dreamed together. They grew up not seeing differences as threats, but as opportunities. They learned that the universe was vast enough for everyone's dreams. Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's representative to the Galactic Cooperative, often visited these schools. Her favorite question to ask the children was always the same. What do you want to be when you grow up? The answers never failed to amaze her. A young Zephyrian wanted to be a human-style comedian. A Vex child dreamed of becoming a peace negotiator. A human girl wanted to learn collective-style perfect harmony singing. This, Sarah would tell her colleagues, is our real victory. Not that we defeated our enemies, but that we helped them become our friends. Not that we imposed our will on the galaxy, but that we inspired the galaxy to choose a better path. 10 years after first contact, the galaxy had settled into its new rhythm. The Galactic Cooperative had grown to include over 10,000 species, each contributing their unique strengths to the collective good. Wars hadn't ended entirely, but they had become rare. And when they did occur, they were usually resolved through the intervention of mixed-species peacekeeping forces, trained in human-style creative problem-solving. The secret weapon that had changed everything was finally understood by all. It wasn't deception, technology, or military might. It was something far simpler and far more powerful. The stubborn, irrational, absolutely human refusal to accept that things had to stay the way they were. The bone-deep belief that tomorrow could be better than today if you were willing to work for it. The crazy idea that enemies could become friends, that problems could become opportunities, that the impossible was just another word for not yet. Humanity had looked at a galaxy locked in eternal conflict and asked the most dangerous question in the universe. What if there's a better way? And then they had spent every day since proving that there was. In the end, the secret weapon humans used against alien armies wasn't a weapon at all. It was a gift. The gift of possibility, wrapped in hope and delivered with the kind of stubborn determination that only comes from a species that learned to thrive on a world trying to kill them. The galaxy had tried to conquer humanity, and instead found itself transformed by the encounter. The Deathworlders had done what they did best. They had survived, adapted, and helped everyone else do the same. And in the vast network of consciousness that now connected billions of beings across thousands of worlds, one thought echoed with perfect clarity. This is just the beginning. And there you have it, space explorers. The secret weapon that humanity used against alien armies wasn't advanced technology or superior firepower. It was something far more powerful. The uniquely human ability to hope, to adapt, and to find the third option when everyone else sees only two choices. If this story resonated with you, I need you to do something right now. Smash that like button if you believe humanity's greatest strength is our refusal to give up hope, even when facing impossible odds. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell, because we're just getting started with these epic HFY stories. I've got dozens more tales of human ingenuity, determination, and the kind of stubborn optimism that can change the galaxy. But most importantly, I want to hear from you in the comments below. What do you think is humanity's real secret weapon? Is it our creativity, our adaptability, or something else entirely? Which character in this story did you connect with most? Elena's courage? Sarah's leadership? Or maybe Zix's transformation? What other aspects of human nature do you think would surprise alien civilization? Do you have ideas for future HFY stories you'd like me to explore? Special challenge for the comments section. Tell me about a time when you or someone you know found a creative solution to an impossible problem. Let's celebrate that uniquely human trait of never accepting that something can't be done. And here's something cool. If this video gets 10,000 likes, I'll create a follow-up story exploring what happens when humanity encounters an even more advanced alien civilization. Will our secret weapons still work? There's only one way to find out. Remember, fellow humans, we're the species that looked at a planet trying to kill us and decided to make it our home. We're the ones who saw the vast emptiness of space and decided it needed exploring. We're the Deathworlders who turned our greatest weakness, our stubborn refusal to accept defeat, into our greatest strength. So keep being impossible. Keep finding the third option. Keep believing that tomorrow can be better than today. Until next time, this has been your guide to humanity's place among the stars. Stay curious, stay hopeful, and remember, we're all in this together.